Hello, and welcome to Top Story Daily Edition. I'm JNS Editor-in-Chief Jonathan Tobin. Thanks for joining me for another discussion on the most pressing issues in the Jewish world. Please like, subscribe, and give us good reviews when you listen to the show. Now let's get started. Dearborn, Michigan is a modest suburb of Detroit with a population of only about 110,000 people. But it may be key to the 2024 presidential election, and that has made its mayor one of the more influential people in the Democratic Party. Earlier this month, Dearborn Mayor Abdullah Hammoud flatly refused to take a meeting with Julia Chavez Rodriguez, President Joe Biden's national campaign manager. Rodriguez had been dispatched by the White House to Michigan to try to persuade local Democrats to stop talking as if they were abandoning Biden because of his support for Israel since the October 7th Hamas massacre. But while Rodriguez was able to meet with Representative Rashida Tlaib, the virulently anti-Semitic Palestinian-American charter member of the congressional left-wing squad, Hammoud snubbed her. Displaying the kind of chutzpah that would have been more fitting for a stereotypical party boss of a big-city political machine of the 19th or early 20th centuries, Hammoud sent the campaign the message that he didn't have time to meet a mere political operative. Hammoud would only meet with policymakers. And in a clear indication of the White House's view of the importance of the Arab American vote in Michigan, the administration duly complied with Hammoud's demand. In short order, Deputy National Security Advisor John Feiner led a delegation of officials to Dearborn that included President Barack Obama's UN ambassador and current administrator of the United States Agency for International Development, Samantha Power. And what he said, which was leaked to the New York Times and subsequently confirmed by the White House, should come as a shock to Democrats who hold on to the belief that the U.S.-Israel relationship is in good hands with Biden. Feiner's message to Hammoud was one of contrition. He said, "We are very well aware that we have made missteps in the course of responding to this crisis since October 7th. He said the administration was sorry for its messaging and policies in the aftermath of the October 7th massacres, in which Hamas terrorists murdered more than 1,200 men, women, and children in southern Israel. Biden had forthrightly declared American support for Israel's right to defend itself, but also for the cause of eradicating Hamas." Biden and Secretary of State Antony Blinken later sought to first delay and then hamstring the efforts of the Israel Defense Forces to take out the terrorists. In recent days, a cascade of blistering and unjustified attacks on Israel has escalated, with Biden saying that Israel's efforts to eradicate Hamas have been over the top, and Blinken claiming that Israel was dehumanizing the Palestinians by fighting back against a genocidal terror organization. So it's hard to imagine why Feiner would think he had to apologize for Biden not valuing Palestinian lives. But as his poll numbers continue to sink, along with the growing questions about his age, Biden can't afford to ignore the open revolt against his policies that encompasses lower-ranking administration officials, congressional staffers, and the president's re-election campaign workers, as well as the left-wing activist base that will supply most of the energy and volunteers to get out the vote this fall. That's the explanation for the highly unusual deployment of top aides whose work is executing the nation's foreign policy to instead carry out a blatantly political mission. There is simply no other explanation for sending Feiner and Power to take a message to a key Democrat constituency. Not only did they apologize for backing Israel, but they articulated a desire to reward the Palestinians with an independent state after they launched a war and committed the largest mass slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. But what makes this all the more remarkable is the fact that the man Biden dispatched the number 2 official in the National Security Council to placate is the sort of extremist that ought to be radioactive to a major party's presidential re-election campaign. The 33-year-old Hammoud is in one sense an illustration of the American dream. The son of Lebanese Shia immigrants, Hammoud attended the University of Michigan, worked as a consultant for the Henry Ford Health System, and won a seat in the Michigan House of Representatives in 2016. In 2021, Hammoud won a landslide victory as mayor of Dearborn, and his background has made him a hot number. He was recently appointed as a member of the advisory board of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, in a party where identity politics rules supreme. In a city where an estimated 54% of the population is Arab, Hammoud has outdone even Tlaib in his reaction to the Hamas atrocities and the subsequent war Israel has waged to eliminate the Islamist terrorist movement. As a New York Times article published in December made clear, Hammoud was the face of anguish about events in Gaza. But rather than condemning violence, he became a leading voice rationalizing Hamas terrorism, including the mass murder, rape, torture, and kidnapping committed on October 7th. Posting on X the day after the massacre and well before any Israeli retaliation for the cross-border invasion had begun, Hammoud claimed Hamas's actions were justified by Israeli actions. Repeating well-worn lies about Israel being an apartheid state and defending the anti-Semitic boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, he also claimed that the slaughter was a natural response to the occupation. He left out the fact that Gaza wasn't occupied on October 6th, since Israel had withdrawn every soldier, settler, and settlement from the Strip in 2005 in a vain effort to create an incubator for peace there. Gaza has been ruled as an independent Palestinian state in all but name by Hamas since 2007. Moreover, when Hamas refers to the occupation, they don't speak of the dispute over the future of the West Bank between Jews and Arabs. They consider every inch of Israel to be occupied, and their charter and all their actions are aimed at destroying the one Jewish state on the planet and bringing the genocide of its 7 million Jews. Such statements help explain why the Wall Street Journal has referred to Dearborn as America's jihad capital. Dearborn has been the site of a number of pro-Hamas rallies in which local imams have spread hatred against Jews, urging Muslims to regard Hamas's murderers and rapists as heroes and to continue the jihad against Americans who back the Jewish state. But any mention of these activities is regarded by left-wing ideologues and even supposedly responsible Democratic politicians, such as Michigan Representative Elisa Slotkin, as bigotry, hatred, anti-Arab, and anti-Muslim. This follows a typical pattern in which left-wingers label any accurate reporting about Muslims' Jew hatred and support for Islamist radicals as Islamophobia. Indeed, even before October 7th, the White House reflexively paired any comment about the surge in anti-Semitism throughout the country to a mythical increase in prejudice against Muslims. And the disingenuous talk about Islamophobia is why politicians like Hammoud are not just mainstreaming hate, but making it politically profitable. Arab American voters who opposed former President Donald Trump because of his historic backing for the Jewish state had been part of the coalition that won Michigan for Biden. But Biden's equivocal stand on the war against Hamas has alienated more than woke campus leftists. Hammoud, Tlaib, and other Arab American politicians think this gives them leverage, not just to have White House officials bend the knee to them, but to actually change U.S. policy towards Hamas. Biden's efforts to force a ceasefire on Israel that would allow Hamas to emerge from the war still alive and in effect its victor is in no small measure the result of his fears that Arab American voters will abandon him in November. Whether that is the main factor behind the polls that show Trump winning Michigan by a possibly decisive margin remains to be seen. But as Feiner's mission to Hammoud shows, Biden and his campaign believe it. Biden has allowed his fears of losing Michigan and the support of his party base to paint himself into a corner about Gaza. If he doesn't prevent the continuation of the war, then he will have given the anti-Semites like Tlaib and other progressives a reason to further distance themselves from his political fate. That would seem to be counterintuitive for Democrats, who regard a victory for Trump as the end of the world. Still, some are so committed to delegitimizing Israel and thwarting efforts to destroy Hamas that they seem to think a Trump victory might be worth it if it means that never again would a Democratic president stand with Israel. At a time when the destruction of Hamas is a real possibility after several months more of hard fighting, Biden's apology to his left-wing critics like Hammoud isn't just humiliating. It may also offer the terrorists a lifeline. That would not only enable them to claim victory, but would also encourage, rather than seek to end, the surge in left-wing anti-Semitism that is on display in the country's jihad capital. Thanks for listening. Please remember to tune in every day for Top Story Daily Edition and every week for the full hour-long JNS TV program. Whether you're listening to us on Apple, Google Play, Spotify, or any of the other podcast platforms, or on the JNS YouTube channel, please like and or subscribe to Top Story. Click on the bell for notifications and give us good reviews. Please write to us at editor@jns.org and let us know where you listen or watch the show and what you think about it. And remember, keep reading and thinking for yourself.